We are live from Sales HQ. All right, that was better than practice. Thank you all for that. So thank you all for coming. Clearly, subject lines really matter to get people's attention. We had, I think in the first day, Lee, we had 45 people registered for this event, which I was quite shocked by. And then every day we got more to about 117 people registered for this event. And I think a lot of it has to do with what's going on in the tech economy and what's going on with jobs. So the title of Never Have to Apply for a Job Again, I think it got your attention, and we're going to get into that. But along with myself, I have two esteemed colleagues that we're really going to help break this down of what the tech economy looked like before the pandemic, during the pandemic, post-pandemic, and then some things that we might be looking for that might improve hiring and stability and get back to more normal state. But more importantly, we're also going to talk about things you all should be doing too, right? To prepare yourself for your career or your next opportunity. So I'm going to pass it to you guys. Could you put on the slide for the panelists, please? I'm going to let you guys do an introduction.
Sure.
Because you'll do it better than me.
Happy to do it. So my name's Tim McLoughlin. I'm the managing partner of Cofounders Capital. I like to wear the same outfit that I wear in the pictures just so everybody knows who I am. How many of you have heard of Cofounders Capital? Anybody here? A couple? Good. So Cofounders Capital is a venture capital firm. We invest in B2B software companies at the earliest stage. So we've raised about $100 million across our three funds. We deployed about half of that. Our last fund was a $50 million fund. And so we're investing about $1 million to $2 million into early stage technology companies, most of which are right here in North Carolina, but across the Southeast. I've never been a VP of sales or led a sales team like that, but I've started a company and I've raised a lot of money, and that's a sales process in itself. And I have a lot of experience placing and helping recruit sales folks for our portfolio companies, which is over 40 now. So I got a little experience, and I just like to orient everybody on where my viewpoint is coming from and just be fully transparent on that. So.
Awesome. Ben Hartmere, I am CEO of Map My Customers. We are backed by Tim and the co-founders team. I've always been in the entrepreneurial kind of realm, but I'm a non-founder CEO. So what that means is I'm not talented enough to start something from scratch. What I will typically do is get involved when a company doesn't have product market fit, but it's got a product, and it usually has at least 6 figures of revenue. And then what I'm hoping to do is get the team that's already in place and just build on it. And so the goal ultimately from there is every business has its life cycle, right? Tim gets involved at certain stages, and then at a certain point, it gets to the point where co-founders says, all right, now it's time for its next investor, right? With its thesis and capital and the like. Similarly, that's kind of the approach that I take. I get involved when a business is really early on, get it to typically about 10 million, and then start to look for exit opportunities for my investors. And so my background is in sales, sort of self-taught, a lot of it self-taught. So some of the ideas that I'll give you are things that I learned the hard way along the way. But I started in sales, and then from there moved more into operations. I'm not a product guy. I always, even though I've been in software my whole life, I will always make sure that I'm tethered to somebody who's really the backbone of all things that we are selling. So I'm all on the commercial side. So a lot of the stuff that we're talking about that Vince has got us set up to talk about is really near and dear to my heart. So
you couldn't give him a sweatshirt to wear?
No, he's got to exit his company. Once he exits, you get a free shirt.
Is that how it works?
Yeah.
You don't get the shirt till you exit?
Well, it's got to be a good exit.
Yeah.
You can't just have any exit. It's got to be a good exit.
Lee,
Then you get a shirt.
I gave my founding members shirts for crying out loud.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
All right, we're on
You
a
gotta
tight budget. So.
And by the way, so we got the perspective of CEO and venture capitalist, right? I'm going to play the role. I used to be a CRO in my previous life. I've kind of retired from that because that's really a hard job, by the way. And it only lasts about 18 months at best. So I like to just play that I was one. And so I'll play that route. So there was a time period, guys. I want to get your perspective on pre-March 2020. And I want to get your perspective, Tim, we'll start with you, of like, what was your world like? What kind of deals were you looking for or finding? And what kind of advice were you giving your founders pre-COVID?
Well, I think pre-COVID, there was like this pretty set venture playbook, which is most folks were still coming into office. So we would find a headquarters and most people would be working at an office and we would be recruiting to a certain place. And then there were these like very natural venture milestones that you needed to hit and that you were raising money towards. So we would be investing in pre-revenue companies or companies that had maybe 50 to 100K in ARR. So this is mostly founder-led sales. I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this. Founder-led sales. We're writing a $500,000 check, and then we're trying to get that company to get off of founder-led sales and get to the $1 million or $2 million mark. Once they got to the $1 million, $2 million mark, you could raise a much bigger round, build out the sales team. Everything was kind of this playbook and kind of natural on what the progression was. And then all of a sudden, COVID happens, and all these folks are starting to change the market that they wanted to be in. People are selling virtual. You don't have visibility onto the people that you're hiring. Sorry if I'm getting into now, like during COVID. But the difference was now everything it's not as much relationship based. It's very metrics based. How are you tracking activity and productivity from your sales folks? Where are you hiring people? Does it really matter anymore? How quickly are we coming back into office? And then all of a sudden, these venture metrics, as funds started to reserve capital or overspend, completely changed. And nobody knew from the board level what the milestones were that you needed to kind of get to the next level. And it just kind of threw everything into a tizzy. But I would say everything was much more organized pre-COVID on how we went about investing and trying to scale our portfolio companies.
And then once COVID came about, some obviously SaaS companies exploded in a great way.
Yeah.
And then things got crazy.
Well, I would say, so this is from the investor perspective. So look at my lens. You raise a venture capital fund and you have 5 years to deploy into initial investments. So it's a 10-year fund life cycle. You have a 5-year investment horizon and a 5-year harvest period. So all of a sudden COVID hits and everybody says, well, we're not going to invest because we don't know what's going to happen, right? And then for 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, so a fifth, 20% of your fund investment cycle, you're not writing checks. And now you got to hurry up and write a bunch of checks. And so if you look at there was this funding lag and then this boom, everybody writing checks, flooding money into companies, overpaying valuations. It's all a result on that fund life cycle and strategy. And so then people were getting funded. There was like, they got no revenue. They got no traction. They got no metrics. And they were just getting funded because it's a result of that kind of fund life cycle.
So Ben, walk us through, I think you were at a previous company before the pandemic and then during the pandemic. What was that like for you as you were going through that with your company?
So in 2018, we sold the company. But if I back up to like 2016, when money was still flowing pretty well, we had raised a small round. So my experience is usually $1 to $10 million companies. So your mileage is going to vary a lot once you get to 10, 20, 40, 50 million and up. But when we raised that round, I faced enormous pressure from investors. And I'm not just saying this because Tim's my investor and sitting to my right.
And he wants a shirt.
And I want I want a better quality shirt. So is that Tim being a bit of an exception, and they are out there. A lot of the investors that you work with, they're spreadsheet monkeys, right? So if you can put it into Excel, hit enter, they'll check to make sure there's no errors in the formula, but that's what they want to see. So if you have this level of, if you can go out and find the talent, right? If you can go get Lee and you're plugging people in, sure, there'll be some diseconomies of scale, right? You're going to have people who are going to step on each other's toes, but you'll figure that out and it'll be fine. So the whole goal was just throw more gas on the fire. And there's some folks who I know in the room here who played it smart, and I did for a little while, but I got an enormous amount of pressure. I had a sales team of about 4 or 5 guys, and force is the wrong word because it was my responsibility. I was running the company to go and triple the team. And it was because sales bodies was what solved all of your growth. We didn't even have problems. We were growing triple digits. I mean, we were a $4 or $5 million company, and the year before that, we were half that size, right? So we were growing like crazy. So at that time, everything was all about just shoving money into the system, even if you didn't have the data to support it. And the other problem, the mistake that I made, and I think a lot of people made, is they put too much investment in the bottom of the funnel and not enough in the top of the funnel. And then what happens? Your top closers get cranky because all of a sudden their ability to get stuff done just got a lot harder. And this happened to me. I actually lost some of my reps to some folks in the room here, but I essentially struggled to hold on to people because that was the challenge we had. So, and again, we can get into this as we're going through from a sales leader's perspective. I got a lot of thoughts on how to prevent that. But that was the pre-COVID world. I don't know if you want me to get into
what happened once COVID hit, March, April, May. What happened for you? Was it a positive thing or a negative thing?
No, it was. So everybody, the PPPs, everybody's heard about that.
Yep.
That put the brakes. Congress came in pretty quickly and said, look, just don't lay off planet Earth, right? So that helped to keep people employed for a period of time, right? So we didn't take a hit because it was free money, and we knew it. And I think everybody in the back of their mind knew that that money was never going to get repaid, right? So there was an artificial time in which the government became not even the lender of last resort, but the one that prevented you from right-sizing your team.
I think as a data point, I think at the time we probably had 25 active portfolio companies, and I want to say 21 of them got significant PPP money.
You only didn't get money if you didn't apply fast enough, right? And so, but then once that money ran out, it all went right back to the data, which is where it should have started, right? So if you found yourself the victim of a RIF, or reduction in force, and it happened in 2021, 2022, folks started looking at the data. You couldn't get the money any longer, right? And so the whole 30, 40% of plan that some of the reps, some of your teams were hitting, that didn't work any longer. And you all of a sudden had to present a legitimate runway. And if you couldn't get that done and there was no cash, no reasonable cash to go out and raise, you had to cut. And the area that you cut was the place that you never should have really overinvested in the first place. And that was too many sales guys, right? Again, I can take the conversation in a lot of different directions as far as what's the right way to grow a sales team, but that's what it was. It was an overstaffing that corrected post-COVID.
So I'm going to give my perspective as a CRO or head of sales of working with a person like this, but not Tim, someone like him and a CEO when you're at a fast-paced startup and COVID hits and you've got this cash. Vince, you got to triple your sales team. Well, we don't have enough pipeline. Vince, you need to triple your sales team. Why is that? Well, we got to grow revenue. So tripling my sales team is going to grow revenue. We got to do it. But 40% of my team might hit quota. What about? So this is the pressure you get as the head of sales CRO. So what happened during COVID is a lot of new people got into sales. Maybe people that shouldn't got into sales, but regardless, a lot of people got into sales for the right reasons, some for the wrong reasons. So all of a sudden we have from 2020 through the current days, an influx of people in sales in a variety of different roles, mostly pushing, you got to be an SDR. And then from an SDR, you're an AE. And from an AE, you're this. And they're pushing this false narrative of what you should do. So what's happening right now, what we're feeling, my humble opinion, is the pain of fast growth, what was traditionally what you needed to be part of a startup company, which I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just the way it was, to now I think what we're seeing is the struggle we're having is that we're actually getting back to a normal state way things should, as Ben said, we're actually tracking metrics that really matter, like meetings to opportunities, the win rate. That's what really matters, right? Not the silly metrics that we were following. So I think that's part of the challenges. And some of those companies, by the way, during COVID, besides the PPP, were just like, you think of Zoom, you think of certain companies are just, oh my God, like selling to education verticals and just blowing up and adding, 5,000% increases, right?
They sell a CRM and CRM companion to mobile sales reps.
Right.
You know what there wasn't in 2020?
Mobile.
Anybody out in the field going around door to door
Exactly.
selling stuff. And so when we're looking at our portfolio and we're like, well, which ones are not going to do very well during this? And we're like, well, good thing Ben's there. Maybe he's got a prayer, right? But yeah, you look at it and you just look at the portfolio and you had no idea how to predict. We invested March in 2020 into a company that sold to dental support organizations, DSOs. They sold to dental offices. You know what wasn't taking sales calls in March of 2020? We wrote a $1.2 million check in March of 2020 in a
Oof.
company that sold into dental offices. Like, they're not answering the phone.
That's a tough call, isn't it?
Yeah.
No one's picking up. Why? Because they're not there.
They're not there.
Yeah. Knock, knock. So let's fast forward now to where COVID's, everyone's feeling better. Some people are getting back to the office, but as we know, not everybody is. What are you currently advising your portfolio companies now? What are you kind of seeing trend-wise now from a higher perspective, from a growth standpoint and so on?
So I'm going to take it back. And when we looked at what do you want to do in venture? You got to do one of three things when you raise venture money. You have to get to a point where you're cash flow positive. You have to get to a point where you can sell the business at an uptick, or you got to get to a point where you can raise more capital. Mm-hmm. Those are the only three options. There's no other option than those three. So which track are you going to be on? And there was a track pre-COVID and even back in 21, 22, where if you had the metrics where you were growing 100% year over year or 80% year over year, you were probably going to be able to raise an additional round of financing and keep that kind of growth trajectory going. You get in now, if you're not growing 4x, like you're not in the top 5% of SaaS startups that venture funds are looking at, and they have a ton of opportunities to look at. And that makes it very hard for it to be a high valuation, high multiple growth. Like here's 20 million on a 100 million pre, and you're only doing 5 million in revenue. Like if you're not growing 4 or 5x, you're not having those kind of conversations, right? And so what are we advising our companies? Do not get caught in the middle. You are either a profitable, durable business that can grow and does not need a ton of outside capital and can control your own destiny, or you're growing 4 or 5x. But if you're burning a shitload of money and you're growing at 80%, that is a terrible formula because you're not in the top 5% that any VC fund's looking at, which means you're not getting term sheets, which means you're running out of money and your business is going to shut down. So that's the advice. I mean, that's as simple as it gets. Be one or the other.
Sounds pretty rosy out there.
Yeah, right. It's really good.
So it's mostly sales reps here. I would say that my general advice, the only companies that I look at nowadays are either right on top of revenue or right on top of expense management. And if I'm a sales rep, I would only focus my attention on those two types of companies. How long does it take a prospect to understand that by buying what you're selling them, they're either going to save a lot of money or they're going to make a lot of money? And everything that's in the middle, that's what gets cut. That's why we've all done MarTech. You've done EdTech. You've done GovTech. I've not done EdTech. I've done GovTech way too long. And I've done MarTech. MarTech did better than I thought it would. But those are hard businesses when you're in the middle, right? Because you can run those out. If you are a company with purchasing decisions and we're going to keep people, or we're going to invest in technology. And again, I'm talking all tech. I've only been involved in tech. So if you're in construction or even in a lot of different areas, I can't really keep up on that. But that is what I would focus on. Get involved in businesses that your solution, the value prop, saves money or makes money, and you're going to stay employed a heck of a lot longer than the people that are in the middle. So that's one tangible thing that I think you guys ought to really sort of consider if you're in the market, or you're when it comes time to look for your next job.
Sorry to cut in, but what about compliance or something driven by compliance?
So what I was going to say is, if you're looking at budget, right, and I need to rank when we're looking at new opportunities, and we think, I need to take a pitch, a 30-minute pitch from a company I've never met, then a week later go into my partner meeting and tell my partners what that company does. I've seen 20 pitches the last week, and I have to remember what they do. So we write down what's the value prop. And then when we write down what the value prop is and I articulate it back, it comes down to, are you driving revenue? Ding, ding, ding. That's key. Are you helping that company drive revenue? Second to that is, are you helping them cut expenses in a way that's like quantifiable? If you are, that's good. Okay. And then third after that, it's like time savings, employee satisfaction, compliance, right? And so if there's budget for that stuff, it will be there. Or if it's like a shift in government policy where all of a sudden you're going to get dinged on it, like Archive Social, which my partner was an investor in, and Neil Chawla was, some of you might know. But there was like this shift where companies had to have it. Like it was a must-have hair on fire problem in the compliance space. But that's the layer that we go through: revenue driver, expense, employee satisfaction and retention, compliance, right? Cover your ass.
Tim knows. I would push back on that. Tim knows it better than I do, but I'm telling you, Anil is one of the smartest guys here in the triangle, and he worked and then he popped.
Yeah.
And he popped because Obama started tweeting, right? And that's what happened, right? So that's awesome. Sometimes you got to get lucky, but he actually, his COO is my former boss at my GovTech company, and they thought their market was super limited, and then Obama started tweeting. I go back to, if it's going to be compliance, make sure that it prevents the company that's buying your product from absolutely losing their company if the failure is exponentially higher without your software than it's with it. I would, and there are folks here that do that employee satisfaction stuff, and I applaud them. They're more talented than I am, because I can't sell it. Because if I'm looking to buy it, I'm saying, okay, you have a Kumbaya product, I can wait a minute, because today I got to focus on revenue. And it's probably why I lose more people than the average person, but it is.
Wait, what?
Yeah. I've slowed that down a lot.
Yeah, we need to
It used
revisit.
worse.
We need to
It used
revisit that.
It used to be worse.
Do you go to
But
his meetings or not?
He won't let me on the board. So
No.
I just, from personal experience, the products that I sold, or the solutions that I sold that had a proven ROI, even in a tough economy. I've been through the dot-com bust and 08, 09 timeframe. Even through those challenging times, when I had a product that was actually demonstrating it was driving revenue, like email marketing services, never had a problem with that, ever. Or you were demonstrating, was that TrueFit? We were demonstrating that you could reduce the amount of returns on items, a true proven, not in theory, but you have case studies, you have customers who can speak to that.
Yeah.
That's what I would look for. But the last thing I would look for, and I think you guys would agree, is like, at the end of the day, you got to pick the companies that you believe in the leadership, because every company is going to go through a tough time at some point. And it's the great leaders that are going to get you through that. And you have to believe in them. That's the thing I would be looking at right now, in addition to, of course, having a proven product that drives ROI. So,
yeah. Well, great leader, I think, depends on the stage of the company, right? So Ben had just talked, he wasn't the founder of the company. We had a great founder. Matthew Snipp founded Map My Customers. He was a great product person. He was great at early sales, but hadn't built and scaled a sales team before, right? And so the leadership is dependent on where the stage of the company. Like, once you are at the point where you need to recruit 10, 20 people to add to the team in a year, that's a different type of leader than somebody that is building a great product and needs the first couple of sales and first couple of case studies, right? It's the same reason why I drop off from boards when our companies get to a certain stage. I can't add as much value at that point as someone else can. And so that's, I just like to think of what the leader is depends on the stage of the company.
true that.
Yeah.
Ben, anything to add?
No, to your ROI point, though, I would tell you, you hit something that made a lot of sense, which is you actually said, if you use your products. Yeah, that sounded like I was surprised by it, which I was a little bit. I've known you long enough. So we're getting into like sales coaching a little bit here. Everybody talks about ROI. You have to be able to know that, first of all, the customer on the other end of it knows that your ROI is garbage. You're going to take whatever happy data inputs and everybody has another website, right? Give us 6 inputs and we'll tell you why this product is going to pay for itself in 3 or 4 months. A lot of what differentiates really good salespeople from average salespeople is the level of intelligence that they have, or experience that they can bring to the sales cycle, right? We live in an age, and this has been going on for 25 years, where every single buyer already knows who you are before you jump on the call. Now you can try to do that force, sort of that force pressure where you BDR and you're trying to get people. What are you really trying to do? You're trying to get that one person that marketing missed, who's in an active buying cycle, and you just got lucky. Because how many times have you called an outbound prospect who isn't thinking about your problem? They're like, you know what? Let me completely readjust my budget, or let me completely reconstitute my team because Kenny's a great sales guy. It's never going to happen. Kenny's going to sell me my product 18 months from now. So the way that you need to, as a sales rep, think about how you add value is to understand what the product does and how the customer is going to be better off with that product, right? Because everyone's doing their research online. If you show up and you just do a happy path demo and just do all this garbage ROI without listening to the customer, you're going to be like every other sales rep. My top sales reps on a call will say, Drew, you're asking the wrong question. Like, that's just not, I hear you, but actually what you should be asking me is this, this, and this. And so many sales reps, and I was one of them, by the way, for too long, just skim the top. They got a 3x5 index card, level of depth on what the product does, and then they're all personality on top of it. You will get lapped by the people that know intrinsically why that product is going to help the customer in years 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You got to know that as a sales rep, or you better have a hell of a personality, or be 6'4" and a former NBA basketball player or something like that, because those guys can sell based on personality alone.
Yeah, it's not me.
Almost.
Yeah, close. About a foot off. Let's open it up to the audience. I'm feeling some itchiness out there. So ask our experts some questions. Stand up, ask a question. I'll repeat it into the mic. And Lee, please help us when we got some questions over here. Anyone? Question?
Yeah, selfish question.
Awesome. Those are the best kind of questions.
Yeah. You're talking about KPIs in your startups. How early in a startup do you usually recommend bringing in RevOps?
That's a great question. How early would you bring in RevOps at a startup, Tim? Or what would you recommend?
When we're
I
investing,
guarantee you your answer is going to be different
Way
than his, and I
different.
guarantee you my answers. I bet you we'll have 3 different opinions on this one.
well, we're not even thinking about, like, we're discounting almost everything. When a founder comes in and sells, right, and it's a founder-led sales motion, they know they are so passionate. They know the product and the problem and the industry so well. They're putting like their life on the line for that whatever that founder-led sales motion is almost irrelevant to what it's going to be, right? Then we hand it off to somebody that maybe can build and lead a sales like generation like model, right? And so then you start get the actual data points as if we were to recruit somebody and bring someone onto a team, what might it look like? But then once you start scaling out, you have some infrastructure that's in place, and not until you're starting to add multiple sales reps and maybe different sales pods, now you start looking at like some RevOps opportunities. That's how I look at it. But you're discounting so much stuff earlier on that garbage in, garbage out, if like you're looking at a lot of that stuff. So I don't know if you're looking for scale series.
Are you in RevOps?
I don't know, Series A, post Series A, like millions raised. What do you think?
So RevOps as a function in really well organizations is there from the very beginning.
Yeah.
RevOps as an independent role, where I've got 35 employees, I have nobody full-time in RevOps, and I've got a HubSpot guru. He's actually starting next Monday, and
We got one. Good.
I did, yeah. But he's a 1099, right? And I'll
Yeah.
pay him $60,000 a year, right? And I'll only get 25% of his time, right? So I'll overpay relative to that. I'm not telling you become a 1099, but that's not a role. I didn't have that in my last company until we were about $7 or $8 million. So if I'm you have to be a Swiss Army knife. Like, you have to be RevOps, marketing ops, maybe BDR manager, right? Because you may say, hey, I'm not going to coach the reps. You got to do that. The rejection, keep them, pick them up off the floor sort of stuff. That's not me. I'm going to make sure that the opportunities they're attacking, the data that we're getting for them and all that stuff, I will take that on. So you've got to, if you're looking, you've got to go a lot wider than let me build you some reports and do some workflow optimization,
I think we're all pretty much aligned. If I were at a startup and I was building a sales organization, I first want to get our first couple of wins and figure out what's resonating with the market. And once I had a couple of sales reps that were starting to have some consistent and repeatable model, and I'm ready to even start an inkling to have a scale, I'd want at least 1 or 2 RevOps. But as I'm really ready to throw the fuel on the fire, I need RevOps to keep us honest what's really happening with the pipeline, with sales enablement, with everything. So my ratio of sales reps to RevOps is probably a lot higher than most people, because I see the true value of where it keeps me honest. It makes the team more efficient. I'd rather have an efficient sales team and a sales team that has great opportunities to work, almost to the point where they're overwhelmed, because that's what really good salespeople want, right? And you keeping them honest and helping them is really vital. So I think it's a great question. Next, anyone? Yes, you, ma'am, in the back.
Hi, Ben Hartmere, job seeker. I'm curious, have you never applied for a job ever again?
Wow.
There it is.
That's
Bringing it-
easy.
that relevant?
Don't do it. Don't do it. Can I start this one? Because I
Yeah.
kind of
It's your
Yeah,
tagline,
exactly.
man.
I'm not, gosh, I say this so much. I'm probably like, Vince, we heard your story. All my best opportunities came through my network, period, end of story. Anywhere where I had sustained success of years of success and high growth came from my relationship. The last one I was at was customer. I knew the founder and the venture capital there. So I trusted them. I knew them. I knew they're up to. I followed the company and I got in that way. My biggest run I had was at a company called Cheetah Mail. I knew the head of sales at the time. He contacted me because he knew I was work. And so I had a trust factor there, and that's how I found it. But I've always been networking from day one, right? I've always been, before there was a thing called LinkedIn, and some of you people aren't even alive to know that there wasn't a LinkedIn at one time, believe it or not, right? So I've never, honestly, every time I've ever applied, I don't know if anyone else had this experience, I have applied on LinkedIn and other things. I don't think I've even ever got anything other than an auto response back, quite frankly. And sometimes the auto response was like, someone said this to me yesterday. They sent in an application to LinkedIn, and within 45 seconds it said, we carefully reviewed your application and you are not qualified, in 45 seconds. So this is what you're going to get, right? So if you keep going down this path of applying, that's what you're going to get. So never apply for a job means don't waste your time. If you have a connection there and they say you have to apply for it, we'll do it. But let's do these things, right? You're doing the right things. You showed up last week or at these events. You're going to find the great opportunity because of these things. You're not going to find it on LinkedIn applying from one-click application, right?
I've got a celebrity shot on this. You said I could ask.
Absolutely. Come on, Lee. You kind of do this for a living, so let's hear it.
Ever take a job where you're not going to be excellent at it. Like, oh, I've got a cybersecurity job. That's sexy. I've got a K through 12 job. That's less sexy. Well, guess what? My mom was a teacher, and I don't really get along well with engineers. So you should actually take the job that you'd be good at. And that's just throughout the whole thing. It's not about what's the salary and the OTE. It's where's the money actually flowing? Like, what are people actually buying? And it might be the coolest startup in town selling to product managers downtown. That's fucking hard. Are you gonna be good at that? Whatever you do in your job, the only thing that matters is not what vertical they're selling into, the CEO, what he said, how much money they raised. It doesn't matter. Are you going to be good at that exact job? Because if you're top 25% at whatever you do, whether it is being a massage therapist or an athlete or a personal trainer or a sales rep, if you're in the top 25% of what you do, you will always be ahead of the game. That's my answer.
Well, it's good, but so I'll give up. Let's take an anecdote, right? So when people come into the town, or people come to Raleigh, move to Raleigh. This happened a lot over the last 4 years. Or people want a job, and they get into the tech scene. People are like, "All right, who should I talk to?" And a lot of folks are like, "Oh, go talk to Tim at Cofounders. He's got a portfolio of companies, kind of like a gatekeeper into."
They say go speak to Scott Wingo.
Scott Wingo says, "Go talk to Tim." And they get a lot more value out of the first conversation. But so they come and talk to me, and what they want is I know what they want. They want introductions into our portfolio companies. But they want a curated introduction where I can say something in the email that's curated to a point where when I email Ben and I say, you need to have a conversation with this person, he's like, you're right. I need to have a conversation. I'm going to do it. Which means, who referred this person to me? Are they part of my trusted network, or have they worked with one of our portfolios or one of the founders that I know before? If I can write in that email, this person came to me through here or has worked at our portfolio company and performed here, we'd hire them again and we'd vouch for them, or that person would hire them again and vouch for them. That is part of the line in the email that's going to get a response. The next thing we need is, why am I introducing them to you? Of all the portfolio companies I can introduce them to, or all the founders, what is uniquely qualified about this person, why I'm introducing them to Ben? Is it the industry they want to be in, the stage of company, the ACVs of the software that they sold before, the sales cycle? Why are they uniquely qualified for me to not blast it out to 25 companies and send it to 3 companies, to the CEOs that are going to meet with that person right then, right? And like, we'll give Ron's here in the audience. Like him and I met, And at the end of our conversation, I said, I got 3 people that I'm going to introduce you to. I'm going to introduce you. 2 of the 3 wound up getting engagements with, right? Because it was highly targeted, very specific as to where we wanted to work and what we wanted to do, and came from a trusted reference. That's the key. If you don't have a trusted reference, like you got to have somebody that's a trusted reference, like in your network.
We were talking about this the other day, and to tag on to what you're saying, don't be a Swiss Army knife.
No, if you come to me and say, I can do it, sorry. I can do everything. I can work for any company. I'm really good. I can fit. I can adapt. I can do whatever. I leave that meeting and I'm like, I have no idea who to introduce you to. I can send email blast out to 40 people saying, I don't really know this person. I don't really know what they do. I don't really know what they're good at. They say they're kind of good at everything. Nobody is replying to that email. But this person has had a experience selling 40K ACV deals in the GovTech world, and you're a CEO looking for a sales hire in that space.
Yep.
Skip all the interviews and hire this person right now because they come from a trusted source. You get the job.
So
I'm passionate.
when you go to Tim, and I'll back up like how to get, like in my opinion, how to get really good at sales. But when you go to Tim, if you sit down and say, and you only know Tim's first name, his last name, what he's at Cofounders, and where he went to undergrad and grad school, that's just enough. And unless your personality is off the charts, Tim's going to walk away, and you're very specific. He's going to walk away saying you're just another individual. Now, if you do a lot of research into the logos that Cofounders is invested into, who the team is, instantly, Tim, he goes in and he's an optimistic guy, right? You can just pick that up based on how he's talking. A lot of the investors you talk to are pragmatic people. They're just level, right? They're sort of right at zero as far as like not too happy, not too sort of like pessimistic. If you jump in and you have done a lot of research, they start to pay attention. They stop looking at their phone, etc. You have to do the research, right? And that's when I think about salespeople, there's a lot of characteristics that make a great salesperson great. Depending on what you're selling, intelligence is actually one of the lower bars. If you're selling something very complex and you're talking to IT people, you better be smart. If you're in the engineering world, med device, etc., relatively smart, unless you're selling bone saws, right? Flip a switch, it either works or it doesn't. But intelligence is relatively again, your mileage is going to vary. Personality does matter. If you can't string a couple sentences together without your palms getting wet, and you've been like that from the jump, go to account management, right? You're already over the hump, they're bought, you just need to make sure you don't lose the account. Then the number one thing is work ethic, and everybody talks work ethic. And what happens is they sprint right in front of the grandstand, and then they walk once you're behind the trees. And then when they come around again, they sprint in front of the grandstand. That's 85 to 95% of salespeople. They walk when nobody's looking. I know when you're walking, right? And that might be good enough, especially pre-COVID, because you're just too expensive to swap out and retrade and the whole thing. But work ethic is the big thing. So if I'm looking at sales and I want to get in front of Vince or in front of Tim or any of these guys, I start with, do I want to be in sales? And then if I want to be in sales, please don't jump from, if you are 40 years old or 30-something years old and you want to completely reinvent yourself, give yourself 2 years to do that. Do not say, I'm going from pharma sales to some other type of sales, because no company, especially in this market, is going to go, oh yeah, no, that sounds like a great idea. You have to earn your way in from an intel and an experience perspective to do that. Now, how do you do that? You got to volunteer and get in front of people and have somebody go, you know what, you really don't know what you're talking about, but I'm going to take you under my wing. Otherwise, please stay in your lane. If you've been doing something for 20 or 30 years, whether it be construction, et cetera. My wife is in tech. She's 30. Well, I won't say how old she is. She's younger than I am. And she's not even 30, so she'd be really happy if she's watching this right now. But that essentially, she's a physical therapist. What is she in right now? She's in elder care tech, because that's the world that she's in. And she's a product manager. Why? Because she prevents people that want to make slick buttons on an iPhone from making them slick, because people with Parkinson's can't hit the tiny 0 or the tiny A or whatever it might be. Do that if you're that kind of person. But she's bringing in that level of expertise. So stay in your lane and then work your butt off. And please deliver 3 times before you ever ask for something. I had a head of marketing, and I won't tell you when so nobody can figure out, was with me, won't even use a he or she pronoun, was with me for about 6 months, crushed the quota because of one particular opportunity. It wasn't even a deal. We didn't even land it, but it was a 7-figure opportunity. And she came, the person came back and asked for a raise. And I lost my mind because you'd been there for 6 months. The second you delivered, you showed up and asked for something. So as you're progressing your way through sales, please deliver for more than 1 quarter before you ask for a raise or that promotion. And then the final piece of advice, because I could go on forever, that I would give you was given to me when I was in my late 20s. We had sold the company. I was number 2 at that company. And I remember asking this gentleman, he had been with Diebold and he had grown billion-dollar companies. And I was lucky enough to be in front of him. And I said, Aldo, Tessie's the gentleman's name. He's now retired. I said, how do I go from here to here? And he asks me, and I was probably 28, 29. He said, well, are you, if you leave where you're at right now, if you leave your current post, would we be okay? And me being the cocky 28-year-old, I was, no. I mean, like, you guys can't live without me. And he goes, well, then you're stuck. He goes, until you can backfill your existing role, you're not going anywhere. So make sure that as you scale, you're bringing other people up, whether it's systems, process, or people, in a way that you can go up and to the right. So again, I can go on forever and ever, but work ethic is the biggest thing, guys.
Cool. One more question. And then, by the way, we have lots of food over there and drinks. So please hang out after we'll wrap this up. Another question from the audience?
So you talked about return on investments even in the toughest times. So can you give some examples?
Of what?
You said you had the return of investment, ROI.
Yeah.
Even in the .com bust that time. And so can you give a specific example?
Absolutely. Yeah. I was selling a solution that was email marketing, and email marketing was just coming about. And, this is, early 2000s was the main way people were communicating with your customers. So think of big consumer companies that need to get in front of them. So we could track literally every campaign that went out, how much was transacting, right, on our back-end analytics. So we could show the campaign ROI and what it was generating. We were generating, for companies like Sears and Macy's, millions of dollars in revenue actually attainable from those campaigns. So they had to do this. The question became, well, why do we use you? So it wasn't the question, should I do email marketing? Why should I use you, and why are you differentiated, and what value do you provide? And so what we figured out when I was at this company called Cheetah Mail was what these marketers wanted was, once the campaign send button was clicked, they wanted real-time analytics, because they wanted to look at that, refresh to see how well the campaign was done. And none of our competitors at the time could do real-time. It was like once a day or refreshed every hours or so on. And when we went to market with that, we literally show that shiny object and be like, okay, how do we get started? And so we never struggled.
So ROI was the price of admission on that. And
You had to. I mean, it's just the name Cheetah Mail came about, by the way, no one asked, but at the time was how fast you can get your email out. So how fast you can get it out was more important at the time than targeting. Then how fast you can get out, and how well is it doing? Because maybe I want to only do 25% send because I want to see how the campaign's doing. So time is of the essence, but tracking was way more important back then, right? Because it was failing. If it wasn't hitting the metrics we wanted, we needed to change the subject line, the content, the offer, all that fun stuff. So that's fun, selling that sort of stuff.
I got a question. Mike came out here also in recruiting tactics. I actually work in-house with companies. I've done a couple of go-to-market teams with VC backgrounds, but wanted to understand, like, what metrics are you guys looking at nowadays in this sort of post-pandemic that triggers, like, I need to start hiring sales?
There you go. That's a great question.
So one of the things that's just come about recently is people are looking at revenue per employee, which is like a newer, like more stressed. And so if you are hitting like kind of some sales metrics and your revenue per employee is lower than what it should be, maybe you're like overstaffed on development and you need to hire a little bit more on the sales team. So that's like a new one that kind of I've seen. But metrics where you're looking at close rates with new sales folks that you're hiring, or conversion for the funnel and what layers that you're hiring. Like the further you get away from founder-led sales and into different pods or however you're structuring your sales organization, the more it becomes like money in, money out. Like you've shown the ability to train to have a real funnel, to have a large enough market that you can attack it. And so when we're looking at that, we're saying, okay, what's going to be, if you pour $8 million into a new opportunity, what kind of discount are you taking from what the previous round was? And if it's like more proven that you can hire, you can train, and you can kind of repeat that model, then, that's why people, let me take a step back and just say, people are paying high valuations for their belief in the accuracy of your model. And the more like proof points and check boxes you have on the assumptions that are driving your revenue model, the more confident they're going to be in to put in more money on a higher valuation. And I often say investors can't attack the model. They can attack the underlying assumptions for the model. And so when, like, if Ben came to me and say, here's our forecast, I'm like, bullshit, Ben, you're not going to pull that off. He goes, well, what don't you believe? Do you not believe that I can hire this many people? Do you not believe that they can close this many deals? Do you not believe that they can generate this much pipeline? Which assumption do you not believe? And so when we look at the metrics, it's how many check boxes and proof points you have on each one of those assumptions, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
During COVID, we exploded. We probably hired 3x on the sales team, like account management, some development. We went enterprise level, and then you got into COVID, and then companies started to dial back their services, and then our revenue model went from, probably quite reduced, and then our hiring just started dipping.
Yeah.
And then it's like what now kind of triggers it to go back up, back into post or pre-pandemic hiring levels.
Yeah, to answer your question though, like the metrics didn't change because of COVID. The growth, the cost of growth, did change, like the access to capital. If you have the time and the data, right? Because Vince was saying earlier, sell a couple things, see what you like, and then you start to stack the model. The first thing you look at is CAC to LTV, right? Customer acquisition cost, long-term value of a customer. Because if I am getting customers, then they're leaving me every year as opposed to every 5 years, I'm chasing the wrong customers. And then once you have that, then to me, if you're not overdoing it, because you can look at all different metrics, I simply look, if I'm going after the right kind of opportunities, do my sales reps have enough time in their day to work those particular deals? And if they don't, then I'm hiring more sales reps. I just watch them. All right, how much time do you need to prep for a call? How much time does the call take? And how much activity do you have after the deal is, after you get off a couple of calls to get the deal done? And then I just look at load balancing and see if they can get it done. And if there's some, you want to look at utilization and all that stuff, but once they get to about 80-85% utilization, I'm hiring another rep. But before you hire that rep, you got to think about pipeline. That was the mistake I was telling you about earlier. I hired end of funnel instead of going top or middle of funnel, and your reps will smell that. If you go all into funnel too fast, then you've got a bit of a problem. So that utilization thing, start to see that that your guys are getting worn out, and then before you hire and solve that problem, do actually a weird thing, make it worse and make the funnel even better, and back solve by letting the crappy deals go, and then bring the new rep in, give him the crappy deals, because he's got to learn to cut his teeth or her teeth anyway. So that's CRO. I mean,
it was interesting when we had the co-working space in Cary where our portfolio companies were working out of, and CEOs would come to us and say, we need to hire more salespeople if we're going to hit our numbers. And I'm like, well, the salespeople you do, I see them walk, they're at the coffee machine for 2 hours a day. They're in the bathroom for an hour a day. Like, I don't know what the hell they're doing, right? But we could see the reps, and I'm like, it's not a capacity problem, right? And so to Ben's point,
I think the percentage of sales teams as a whole hitting their overall team quotas, right? Like, where's that sweet spot? Like 30-40%? What would you deem success? Like, you're
that's Bulldog Ben question.
It's not. It's all good. I will tell you right now, my sales reps, they don't have a quota. I give the company a quota, and I tell those guys that we're all going to hit it collectively, and they're going to be up and down. Now, when you get a bigger team, you got to run a quota. We're still relatively lean, but it depends on what culture you want to bring into the organization. They're Scott Wingo's of the world and Ryan Walsh's. They ran a friendlier. Brad McGinnity, who's here, he runs a friendlier culture. I run a tougher culture. So it really depends on what you're trying to bring in. You're moving deck chairs around on the Titanic. You're either growing the company or you're not. And whether 100% of people are at 0 or 0% of people are at 100, you're still getting to 0. So it really just, but I say that reps do care, and they don't care for your job. They want to put 100% so that they can put it on LinkedIn. So then when they go to Tim and ask for a job, he's like, oh, you're 100%. So that.
But you work from at my customers,
Yeah,
and I'm
so I
not
can't
poaching
talk
you,
to you.
so yeah.
Yeah.
Stay
So I
there.
talked out of both my sides of my mouth there, but quota to me it's kind of garbage. Like I don't pay a ton of attention to it. I look at your metrics, I look at your activity, and then your numbers will come.
Well, we're out of time. Tim, Ben, awesome. Lee, thank you very much. I swear these guys aren't going to leave. We're going to hang out. So if you got more questions, feel free to head up these experts. And I thank you all for your participation and being here today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.